Picture a man sitting alone at night. The lights are dim, the room is silent, and the only thing he hears is the echo of his own thoughts. He doesn't cry anymore, not because he's strong, but because he's emptied himself of every tear that once tried to explain his pain. His silence isn't peace, it's survival. The kind of silence that comes after storms that no one saw, after losses that no one noticed, after years of pretending everything was fine. You might think he's cold, detached, unfeeling, but beneath that calm surface lies a history too heavy for words, the kind that rewires a man's mind and reshapes his soul. Every man who has gone through too much becomes a different creature. He no longer reacts to things the same way. Where others panic, he remains calm. Where others dream, he hesitates. He has seen what breaking feels like, and once you've known that, hope becomes a dangerous luxury. He doesn't trust easily, not because he hates people but because he's learned that even love can turn into a weapon. Every smile he gives costs him effort. Every conversation, every bit of openness, feels like walking barefoot on glass. The world may see him as distant, but what they don't understand is that distance is his last defense. Psychologically, this man exists in a paradox. He craves connection but fears it. He seeks meaning, yet doubts it exists. He's been through pain so consistent that his brain has adapted, not by healing but by hardening. He no longer interprets emotional cues the same way. Neuropsychologists call it emotional blunting, the mind's way of protecting itself after prolonged stress or trauma. But what's fascinating is that behind this apparent numbness often lies hypersensitivity. The same man who appears cold can feel everything too deeply. He just doesn't show it anymore because showing it once got him hurt. This is the psychology of endurance, the aftermath of battles fought alone. It's not just about trauma, it's about transformation. Every experience, every loss, every betrayal forces the mind to rewire how it perceives the world. What once felt safe now feels threatening. What once gave joy now feels meaningless. The man who has gone through too much stops seeking happiness the way others do. He begins searching for stability, peace, predictability. He no longer wants excitement. He just wants silence that doesn't hurt. So what happens inside a man who's been through more than he was built to handle? How does his brain adapt? And what does his soul become when endurance becomes a lifestyle? That's what we'll explore. The unseen mechanics of pain, the rewiring of emotion, and the quiet evolution of a man who no longer fears losing, because he's already lost too much. When a man goes through too much, his mind begins to rewire itself in ways that even he doesn't notice. Pain doesn't simply pass through him. It reorganizes him. It shapes how he perceives danger, how he measures trust, how he interprets silence. To understand such a man, you have to think like someone who's lived too long in uncertainty. The nervous system, once built for short bursts of stress, adapts to survive in long-term chaos. The body remains in a constant state of alert, cortisol flowing through his veins even on calm days, heart rate rising at the sound of nothing. His mind no longer believes in safety, because safety, to him, is just the moment before the next disaster. This is where trauma meets identity. Every painful experience becomes a lesson the brain etches deep into its circuits. Betrayal teaches distance. Loss teaches detachment. Rejection teaches self-containment. Over time, he stops reacting the way others do, not because he doesn't feel, but because he's learned that feeling too much is dangerous. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes overactive, scanning for threats even when there are none. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, the rational mind, tries to restore balance but slowly burns out. What's left is a state of quiet vigilance, a man who never fully relaxes, even when he laughs. To outsiders, he looks stoic, controlled, emotionally disciplined. But beneath that surface is exhaustion, the kind that comes from constantly suppressing emotions. Chronic stress changes neurochemistry, dopamine, serotonin and oxytocin. The molecules of joy, trust and bonding no longer flow freely. This isn't a choice, it's a physiological adaptation. The brain prioritizes survival over happiness. When you've been through too much, joy feels foreign, trust feels dangerous, love feels temporary. His emotional world becomes muted, not because he's broken, but because his brain has learned that attachment equals vulnerability. This man often develops something psychologists call learned helplessness, the belief that no matter what he does, pain will find him. It's not pessimism, it's conditioning. Repeated experiences of loss, betrayal, or failure teach the mind to stop expecting improvement. Hope begins to feel like a setup for disappointment. So he stops trying, stops dreaming, stops waiting for things to change. He lives in a constant middle ground, never too happy, never too sad, a protective neutrality that numbs both extremes. The irony is that this numbness, while protective, becomes its own prison. You cannot be hurt deeply when you feel nothing, but you also cannot be moved deeply either. Love, joy, awe, they lose their texture. In relationships, this rewiring shows up as emotional distance. He may crave intimacy, but it triggers the same neural pathways as danger. His nervous system can't distinguish between love and threat because both have led to pain before. So when someone gets too close, he unconsciously withdraws. The warmth of affection feels unfamiliar, almost unsafe. It's not that he doesn't care, it's that caring too much once nearly destroyed him. His detachment isn't arrogance. It's armor built cell by cell over years of surviving what should have broken him. Even his language changes. He stops saying "I feel" and starts saying "I think." It's safer to analyze than to feel. Safer to intellectualize than to expose the heart. The more a man endures, the more he begins to distrust peace. Quiet moments make him uneasy because they remind him of the calm before every storm he's lived through. He can't enjoy rest, because rest feels like weakness. He may even sabotage moments of happiness, unconsciously testing whether good things can last. When they don't, his mind whispers, "See? I was right." It's a confirmation loop that feeds his worldview, that the world is unreliable, that love is conditional, that safety is temporary. These aren't beliefs. They're scars disguised as logic. But this state doesn't make him emotionless. Quite the opposite. He often feels too much. He absorbs tension in a room, senses deceit without being told, recognizes danger in silence. His empathy is hyper-developed, but he hides it under restraint. Years of emotional damage turn sensitivity into insight. He notices patterns others miss, motives others can't read. But that insight is double-edged. It isolates him. When you see too clearly, you stop belonging easily. The world feels transparent and exhausting. He watches people chase illusions he's already lost faith in. Their enthusiasm reminds him of what he used to be, before reality stripped him bare. Philosophically, this man lives in what existential thinkers like Camus or Kierkegaard might call the aftermath of meaning. Once he believed in purpose, love, success, fairness, but life dismantled those illusions. Yet he didn't die, he kept breathing, and in that continuation, he finds a strange form of wisdom, that life may not owe him answers, yet he must keep walking. This awareness can harden him or humble him, depending on how he processes it. Some men become cynical, replacing disappointment with detachment. Others become quietly wise, understanding that life's cruelty doesn't cancel its beauty, only reframes it. But to reach that second state, he must first walk through bitterness, isolation, and Neurologically, prolonged adversity can also trigger something psychologists call post-traumatic growth. It's the paradox of strength through suffering. The same experiences that shatter the psyche can, over time, deepen self-awareness, empathy, and purpose, but only if the man confronts his wounds instead of numbing them. The brain can rewire again, this time toward resilience. New neural pathways form when pain is integrated instead of avoided. Mindfulness, self-reflection, therapy, or even solitude can activate this recovery process. The man who's gone through too much often becomes the one who understands too deeply. His pain turns into perception, his endurance into empathy. Yet this transformation is not guaranteed, it's earned. Every coping mechanism he's built, emotional detachment, self-isolation, humor, intellectualization, once served a purpose. They kept him alive. But at some point, survival must evolve into living. The man who's gone through too much struggles to make that leap. He doesn't know how to lower his defenses without feeling naked. Vulnerability feels like walking back into a burning house. His trauma tells him, never again. But life, love, and healing whisper, you're safe now. The conflict between those two voices defines his inner world. It's not a war of good versus evil. It's a war between past and present. In social settings, he often becomes the calm observer. He speaks less, listens more, measures everything. He's not impressed by noise, not fooled by appearances. People might label him distant or mysterious, but what they're really seeing is a man who has learned that words mean little compared to actions. Trust, to him, is no longer an emotion. It's data. It's observed over time, proven in silence. He doesn't open up easily because he knows the cost of being misunderstood. His silence isn't pride, It's self-preservation. Overexposure to pain also alters his relationship with time. He lives more in the past than in the present, not out of choice but because his nervous system is still replaying unresolved moments. Flashbacks aren't always visual. Sometimes they're emotional, sudden waves of emptiness or dread, triggered by small things. A smell, a song, a phrase. These micro-flashbacks are the echoes of unprocessed grief. They make him appear unpredictable or detached, when in truth he's reliving emotions too complex to express. And yet, despite all this, there's something profoundly human about him. He carries invisible weight with quiet dignity. He doesn't demand sympathy or attention. He doesn't want to be fixed. What he truly wants is understanding. Not someone to erase his past, but someone to coexist with it. He doesn't need grand gestures, only consistency. His love, when he gives it, is not light or casual. It's sacred, because for a man who has gone through too much, giving trust again is an act of extraordinary courage. It's choosing to risk the wound again, hoping this time it won't come. This is what psychology often fails to capture, the silent resilience of the human spirit. Science explains the mechanisms, the neurotransmitters, the neural adaptations, the behavioral defenses. But what it can't measure is the quiet decision a man makes every morning to keep going, to face another day knowing he carries more than most could bear. That decision, repeated over years, becomes his identity. Not victimhood, not weakness, but quiet strength. The kind that doesn't need to be seen, only live. The man who has gone through too much lives between two worlds. The one that hurt him, and the one that asks him to heal. He doesn't fully belong to either. When he looks back, he sees versions of himself that no longer exist. The boy who trusted easily, the man who believed effort guaranteed reward, the dreamer who thought life was linear. They're all ghosts now, scattered across memories he rarely visits. But when he looks forward, he doesn't see a clear path either, only a fog of uncertainty. This in-between space is what philosophers call liminality, the psychological threshold where transformation occurs, but identity is still undefined. Here he's forced to ask the hardest questions, not about others, but about himself. Who am I without the pain? If everything I've survived has built my walls, what's left of me when I tear them down? Suffering rewrites the self, but healing demands a reconstruction, and that's far more terrifying than the pain itself. Because when you've lived too long in darkness, light hurts your eyes. When peace finally arrives, it feels unfamiliar, almost suspicious. Psychology offers frameworks, but they rarely capture the loneliness of recovery. Theories like cognitive behavioral therapy talk about reframing thoughts. Attachment theory explains his fear of closeness. Trauma models describe hypervigilance and emotional numbing. But none of these theories describe the quiet nights where he argues with himself about whether he deserves softness. That's not something a textbook measures. That's philosophy, the confrontation between what we've endured and what we still hope to become. The Stoics believed suffering could be the raw material for virtue. Epictetus said, "Difficulties show what men are, to endure without bitterness, to rise without hatred. That is mastery." Yet even Stoicism warns of the danger of misused strength. The man who over-identifies with his endurance risks turning it into identity. He begins to measure his worth by how much pain he can take, not by how much joy he can create. That's when resilience mutates into numbness, when the armor becomes the body. Existentialism offers another lens. Camus wrote that the absurdity of life, its lack of clear meaning, doesn't condemn us, it frees us. The man who has gone through too much often becomes an existential being by default. He stops chasing happiness and begins searching for truth. He understands that comfort and clarity are illusions. He stops asking, "Why me?" and starts asking, "What now?" This shift is powerful. It transforms pain from punishment into perspective, but it also isolates him. Most people still live in the illusion he has outgrown. They speak in certainties. He lives in questions. They crave validation. He values silence. From a neurological standpoint, healing requires contradiction. The same brain that once associated vulnerability with danger must now learn that vulnerability can coexist with safety. It's a process called memory reconsolidation, the rewriting of emotional memory through new experiences. But here's the catch. For the new memory to form, the man must first allow the very experience that scares him. Connection, trust, openness. He must expose the wound to light so the brain can rewire. And that's the paradox of recovery. You have to risk pain to unlearn it. Emotionally, he lives like a soldier after war. He may look fine, function well, even smile, but internally he's still scanning for landmines. He doesn't fully relax because his body remembers. Trauma isn't stored as words. It's stored as sensation, the chest tightness when someone raises their voice, the urge to leave when someone gets too close. These are the body's language for don't let it happen again. And yet each avoidance also prevents healing. The system stays trapped in defense. That's why solitude feels both safe and suffocating. Alone he can breathe. No threats, no expectations. But too much solitude turns survival into isolation. Humans regulate through co-regulation. The nervous system calms through safe presence. When he avoids connection, he avoids the very thing that could restabilize him. So the challenge isn't simply to be strong, it's to be open again. That is infinitely harder. Spiritually, suffering forces him to reconsider his beliefs. Many men who've gone through too much lose their old gods. They no longer believe in the transactional version of life. Do good, receive good. They've seen too much chaos for that. Yet some find something deeper, not religion, but reverence. A quiet spirituality born from survival itself. They stop praying for miracles and start noticing them in small acts. A stranger's kindness, a sunrise after a sleepless night, a moment of laughter that doesn't feel forced. In those seconds, they glimpse the sacred hidden inside the ordinary. Another transformation happens in how he perceives others. Once he might have judged people quickly. Now he understands that everyone is carrying something invisible. Pain expands perception. It makes him gentler, less naive, more real. He may still appear distant, but internally he's more compassionate than ever. He no longer believes in simple stories, villains and heroes, winners and losers. He's seen that everyone, including himself, is capable of both cruelty and grace depending on what they've endured. This complexity becomes his new truth. In therapy, psychologists describe integration as the final stage of healing, when the person no longer defines themselves by trauma, but includes it as part of their story. For this man, integration means accepting that he's changed, without mourning who he used to be. It's realizing that some versions of him had to die for others to live. The child who trusted everyone, the lover who ignored red flags, the optimist who thought life was fair. Those selves were necessary then, but unsustainable now. Maturity is the burial of innocence, not its betrayal. Yet, not every man reaches integration. Some stay stuck in survival mode indefinitely. Their intelligence becomes their shield, their logic their hiding place. They quote philosophy, read psychology, understand everything intellectually, but never feel it emotionally. They can analyze love, but not receive it. They can describe vulnerability, but not live it. That's the danger of over-philosophizing pain. It becomes a concept instead of a passage. There's also a social dimension to his struggle. Society doesn't know what to do with quiet, introspective men. The world rewards loudness, confidence, certainty, but the man who's gone through too much speaks a subtler language. His strength is invisible, his calm is misread as apathy, his solitude is arrogance. Few realize that what looks like detachment is actually control, the discipline of a man who refuses to let his pain spill onto others. That kind of restraint is rare and often unappreciated. But beneath that restraint lies fatigue, emotional fatigue, the slow erosion of hope. Some days he wakes up and feels nothing, not sadness, not joy, just neutrality. Psychologists call it anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure. It's not depression in the dramatic sense, it's quiet depletion. Yet even here, there's insight. The absence of feeling teaches him the value of presence. When emotions return, even mildly, they feel profound. A small laugh feels like redemption. A genuine conversation feels like grace. Recovery often begins with those small resurrections, not grand breakthroughs, but quiet returns to self. From a philosophical lens, every man who suffers deeply faces a moral choice: become bitter or become awake. Bitterness says, the world broke me, so I'll break it back. Awakening says, the world broke me and still I will see its beauty. Both are valid, but only one leads to peace. Choosing awakening doesn't erase pain, it redeems it. It turns scars into symbols, wounds into wisdom. And though he may never speak of it, every man who reaches this state carries a silent kind of nobility, the grace of someone who survived his own extinction and returned to tell the story. This reflection leads to a final truth. Healing isn't a return to who you were. It's the slow construction of someone new. The man who has gone through too much doesn't become normal again. He becomes deeper, more discerning, less reactive, more aware of impermanence. His peace doesn't come from ignorance, but from understanding. He no longer demands that life be fair, he only asks that it be honest. He stops chasing perfection and starts valuing authenticity. And perhaps most importantly, he learns that strength isn't the absence of pain, it's the refusal to let pain define him. The tragedy of his journey is that few will ever fully understand it. The world sees his composure but not the cost, yet he doesn't need them to. Understanding himself becomes enough. When he finally stops asking why life hurt him, and starts asking what it taught him, the transformation completes. He moves from victim to witness, from suffering to meaning. And in that subtle shift, everything changes. In the end, the man who has gone through too much is not defined by what he has lost, but by what he still carries despite the loss. His strength isn't loud or visible, it's the quiet endurance of someone who has learned that life does not owe him understanding, only opportunity, the chance to rebuild himself from the ruins. He no longer seeks to be unbroken, he seeks to be whole, even with the cracks, because over time he realizes something profound. Broken things can still hold light, sometimes even more beautifully than before. He stops resenting the world for its cruelty and starts observing it with calm detachment. Not apathy, acceptance, the kind that comes from seeing life for what it is, fragile, unfair, unpredictable, yet somehow still worth living. His pain, once an anchor, becomes a compass. It points him toward depth, toward meaning, toward authenticity. He begins to prefer real conversations over small talk, solitude over noise, peace over excitement. He no longer needs validation because he has learned to respect the man who survived when he had every reason not to. Philosophically, this is where endurance turns into wisdom. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." The man who has gone through too much finds his why not in external success or approval but in inner alignment. He understands that the world may never apologize, people may never change, and some wounds may never close. But life still moves forward, and so must he, not as the same man who began the journey, but as the one who has accepted that scars are just the body's way of remembering that it healed. In psychological terms, he transitions from survival mode to self-mastery. His triggers become teachers. His pain becomes a signal, not a sentence. He learns to sit with discomfort without letting it define his choices. He begins to trust small things again, a morning routine, a quiet walk, a conversation that feels genuine. Each moment of trust rewires his brain towards safety, slowly teaching his nervous system that life no longer needs to be lived in defense. And when he finally looks in the mirror, he sees not the man who suffered, but the man who adapted. Not the one who was broken, but the one who rebuilt himself in silence. He doesn't need the world to understand the cost of that transformation. He just needs to keep walking, not with pride, but with presence. Because to have gone through too much and still choose gentleness, to have seen the worst and still choose hope, that is not weakness, that is evolution. So if you ever meet such a man, understand that his calm is not emptiness, it's mastery. His silence is not distance, it's control. And his eyes, though tired, still carry the light of someone who refused to give up on being human. And if you are that man, remember this: you have nothing left to prove. You've already survived the storm. Now it's time to learn how to live in the sunlight again.